Hey everybody, welcome once again to the Football Fandemic, where we are going to be talking Week 4 and Kings of the North. Here today with our guest co-host Josh Kolojeski, myself and Brandon Colmark, right here on the Football Fandemic. All right, guys, here we are. As you can see, we have a guest host with us today. Josh, it's nice to have you with us.
Yeah, it is.
Why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your background real quick before we get going?
Yeah, well, I'm excited to be here. I am from Minnesota, big Vikings fan, as you can see.
Oh,
and when I heard there was a Packer fan on the podcast, I knew I needed to put some Vikings representation in here.
Well, and this is the perfect week because we're going to get to it. But you two are going to be going head to head. And when I say you two, you can obviously, those of you who've been with us, you know Brandon is the Packers fan. You can see the cheese off to his, what is that, his left there in the screen. I'm a Colts fan, but I couldn't figure out how to get my Colts stuff in the screen. So we'll have to work on that. But yeah, so we're gonna talk a little bit about that. And we were just talking with Josh. Was that yesterday? Last night? Two days ago.
2 days ago.
I'm so out of my week, but yeah, 2 days ago, and we realized he was a huge Vikings fan. I already knew that, but then those two were talking, and they realized there is a game this week, and so we surreptitiously got Josh to come up on this podcast, and that's going to be exciting. But we are, as always, going to start with some NFL news, some things going on in and around the NFL, and if you remember, our late co-host, no, that sounds like he died. Our co-host who got a job and may be joining us again in the future. That's a little sneak peek if we can find a way to work that out. But Josh Haupt used to always put together that news reel, all the topics. So I don't have one in mind. We're just going to throw it out here for any news that you guys know of going on in the NFL, and we'll talk about it. What's happening in the NFL?
I've got an injury update on my side. The big one we've been talking about since the last 5 minutes of week 1 in Brazil is Jordan Love. It looks like Jordan's on track to be playing this week at Lambeau Field with the Vikings coming to town. We'll be talking more about that specific game matchup in a little bit. Last week, we thought we were really close to seeing Jordan play. He was on the field warming up with the team and then was marked out at the deadline for being marked out for the game. We obviously saw Malik Willis go in and do excellent in that game against the Titans. We're excited to have Jordan Love potentially return to us. He's practiced every day this week at a limited basis, but is out there practicing. He does have a sleeve on his leg. It does look like he will be back this week, and his warm-ups in Tennessee were looking real nice too.
Well, you better hope that he is ready to go and not just pushing to get back, because this is a big one this week.
Yeah. And then I have some other injury news as well. Austin Eckler has been ruled out for the Washington Commanders this week. He had a really good game against the Bengals on Monday night. He left that game with a concussion, so he's not going to play. He's been a really good complement to Brian Robinson Jr. in that Washington backfield. And in San Diego or Los Angeles, he was getting it done like primarily in the pass game, but he had a really long touchdown run in that Bengals game and also looked good at the return. So that offense might be a little bit worse for wear, but Jaden Daniels has gotten them going pretty well. And then Javon Hargrave is the 49ers' big defensive tackle. He is going to miss the rest of the season with his right triceps injury. He tore that in San Francisco's loss to the Rams, and he has been just a beast up the middle. He was more disruptive when the Vikings played the 49ers than Nick Bosa was coming on the outside, and I think that allows offensive lines that are going up against the 49ers to bring some more help to Nick Bosa's side because they don't have to double team somebody like Javon Hargrave in the middle. So that could hurt for the 49ers defense. And they've been dealing with injuries all season long on both sides of the ball.
49ers have not looked like the 49ers I expected to see. Are you guys worried about them? This is early in the season, but are you worried about the 49ers this year?
I'm not too worried about them. We've seen what Kyle Shanahan can do in a short time frame with this team. In my personal opinion, all the stuff that's going on is just inner locker room uh, dealings. We know before the season started, they were having issues with Brandon Ayuk. It looks like Brandon Ayuk is not fully gelled on the field yet either, which is a major part of that team. Christian McCaffrey, another major part of the team. We saw he went out. They're still looking for that X factor in the running game, and we have not seen too much out of Deebo Samuel yet this season. Once those pieces start to click, I think it's just the regular old 49ers again. And it will happen sooner than later, given Kyle Shanahan's history.
Do you think they'll still be able to get in the race? They're 1-2. Seahawks in their division 3-0.
Yes,
I definitely do. I think that, even with Christian McCaffrey going over to Germany this week to kind of see a specialist to see what's going on with his ankle, like Jordan Mason has been like a really good runner for them. He hasn't been Christian McCaffrey, but nobody is.
Right.
So he's been able to get them going. Deebo Samuel was out last week. George Kittle was out that last week, and they still were able to get themselves out to a good lead against the Rams, who were basically fighting for their season at that point, and they fought back hard and were able to get that win. So I'm not worried about the 49ers. Brock Purdy is an excellent quarterback. I think obviously the Javon Hargrave injury is going to hurt their defense a little bit, but they still have studs on that side of the ball on all three levels of the defense.
And they're playing New England this week, which hasn't been inspiring. They haven't been like as bad as some teams we've seen. They're not one of those 0-3 bottom dwellers at this point, but they're it's a winnable game. So yeah. In other news, is Justin Herbert going to play this week? Have we heard anything?
I hope he is. I have him in one of my fantasy leagues as my quarterback. My quarterback before him was Tua, and he is not playing this week.
So it seems like you've got the curse for quarterbacks, right? Put them on your fantasy league and
just in the one league. Just in the one league. Yeah. I hope he's back. I want to really see Justin Herbert flourish under this Harbaugh tree. We know what he can do as a head coach. We've seen him come in and make excellence in this quarterback position. And I really want Justin Herbert to have something like that, something he hasn't had since he's been in this league. And Matthew knows, ever since he's been drafted, I have been very high on Justin Herbert. I think his talent ceiling is not capped. He just needs the right coaching under his infrastructure to succeed.
And in fantasy, he's done well since he's come in the league. That's not been a problem. But in the real world of football, his wins haven't always been enough. And it's like you said, you have a strong feeling that some of the coaching had something to do with that. Although, their offense sometimes could look really good, they could never put it all together.
We do know on the side of the Chargers, since Justin Herbert's been under the center, every time they've played the Chiefs, it's been within a one-score game. And so this week they have the Chiefs. If Justin Herbert's in, I'm expecting a big firepower game like historically we've had between those organizations on Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert matchups.
Yeah, and that's always a big win for those two teams because they're going to need those wins down the road as they go. And Kansas City always seems to suck them up somehow. Kansas City, I hate it because every year, even when they're doing bad, they still barely win, and the win's all that matters. And so right now they're one of those 3-0 teams, which brings us to where I want to go next, unless there's any news that I have not covered. Okay, what I want to go to next is here. Last week we talked about which is the most surprising 2-0 team, which is the most surprising 0-2 team. And we talked about those a little bit, but now we're 1 week further, and we've still got some 3-0s and 0s and 3s, and I want to talk just a little bit about them. I want to start with the idea of which 3-0 team goes undefeated the longest. We have 5 3-0 teams right now, right? We have let's remember them here. We got the Bills. In the AFC East, we have the Steelers. Surprisingly, that was one of our more surprising ones. In the AFC North, we have the Chiefs. Not surprising at all, even though they haven't played their best. We have the Vikings. That was one of our very surprising ones last week, Josh. Just so you know, that was one of our surprising teams.
It surprised me too.
We did not expect Sam Darnold to come in and just click like he is clicking there. And then, of course, we have the Seahawks. Did I say all 5 of those?
I think you did.
I did.
Let's break down who we think would still win this week. Let's start there. So if we start with the Steelers, they're playing Matthew's team, the Indianapolis Colts. Matthew, do you just want to give a quick prediction? What does this matchup look like for your team?
Well, it's tough. I'm going to tell you this. The first 2 weeks, the Colts looked like trash, right? Because they were run on horribly. They made Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs look like, brand new, fresh, elite running backs again. And I don't know that either one of those guys are. I think they're going to have good weeks and they're going to have bad weeks. We made them look real good on the weeks they played us. Last week, we limited that run game and won. Now, having that said, our offense is super hit and miss. Our new quarterback, he can look great with those big bombs, but he just can't seem to get the intermediate and underneath throws like right there. And some of that is his receivers not necessarily catching everything, but some of it's his throws. And those things have got to come together. And I said last year he needed reps. I mean, he had, 6 starts in high school, 13 starts in college, and then last year he only got 4 starts in the NFL. So he is super inexperienced. He's going to have that. But I don't know when that's going to start to click. I don't know that it's yet. But here's the thing. At any time, Indianapolis can be a dangerous team. They can suddenly have these offensive surges. And if they stop that run, they can be a team that can scare other teams. Could happen. Now, you look at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has been, let's say it, mostly defense there, taking care of that team. And Justin Fields is doing that slow growth thing also. But he's not throwing all the interceptions like we've had and some other young quarterbacks have had. So I think if you're looking statistically, I say Pittsburgh is probably going to win this week. But as a homer, I would like to say that there's going to be a surprise this week, and Pittsburgh is going to, one of those teams that we didn't expect is going to kind of fall out of that 3-0 lineup this week. I think this could be an opportunity. Now, I don't think it's going to happen that way this week. I think Mike Tomlin always plays us tough, and so realistically, I think they could win again this week. And you're going through this week's opponent, so I'm not going to go to their next 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, well,
I'll echo that too. I think the Colts are going to win that game. The Steelers have been getting it done with their pass rush, and Anthony Richardson is kind of like the antidote to anybody's pass rush. He's been holding onto the ball for longer than any NFL quarterback in the league, but his sack rate is still extremely low. And part of that's the Colts offensive line. Part of that is Anthony Richardson's just ability to stay strong in the pocket and also get out of the pocket with his speed. So I think he can kind of be the guy that evens up this matchup a lot more. And I'm not a huge fan of the Pittsburgh running game. And even though the Colts got gashed the first 2 weeks, I think we saw last week that if there's a tough offensive line, they're able to kind of get in and stop the run. I think it's going to be a similar script as to what we saw last week. And I think Anthony Richardson's going to make some big plays and get you guys the dub.
I'm really hoping so. I heard something recently, and maybe you guys have heard this too, that in every game, one of the announcers has to say, "Oh man, when Anthony Richardson's running at you, that's 250 pounds, whatever." He's like a linebacker. And then I was watching a Baltimore game, and they're talking about Henry.
Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry, yeah.
And they said, he's 250 pounds, blah, blah, blah. I did not. I don't know if this is true. I should have just looked it up on the internet because that's what the internet's for. But are they really like the same size? Because if so, man, I knew Anthony Richardson was like a big quarterback. But if he's the same size as Derrick Henry, my goodness, that would be scary.
I don't have the stats in front of me. I think Anthony Richardson is a little taller. And I think Derrick Henry's a bit more muscular.
Yeah, man,
that's my gut reaction. But like AJ Dillon's also 250 pounds. A different stratosphere of player, obviously, but still 250 pounds and most of that is thighs. He just plows over you.
Oh yes, we're gonna have some fun talking about previous running backs in the. Anyway,
so let's hit up the Seattle Seahawks. They play Monday Night Football in Detroit. This is a game I think it's safe to put your bets with Dan Campbell. I know the Seahawks offense has been looking really good. DK Metcalf's been gelling in the game real nice. Tyler Lockett's been gelling in that pass game real nice. Geno Smith has looked really good for quote unquote no-name quarterback these past few years. Coming in, trying to replace Russell Wilson. He's never going to amount to what Russell was doing there. I think Geno Smith looks really good. But I also really, really like Detroit in this matchup. I never count out Dan Campbell. Long listeners of the show, and Josh, you'll understand, ever since Dan Campbell's been hired, we've been raving about Detroit. Even that first year when everyone wasn't so high, they got incrementally higher. We've just been high on Detroit the whole time. We love what Dan Campbell's been doing with the organization. And if we know there's a coach that is so mentally insane to go and just beat teams he's not supposed to, it is Dan Campbell. Okay. I like the Lions in this matchup. They're at home. They're going to have an active fan base at the game as they're growing in popularity. It's going to be really hard for the Seahawks to go into an indoor stadium and win this game.
Yeah, this one's I like Detroit, but it's a little tougher for me this week, and partially because of the way Jared Goff hasn't looked great. I'm not going to lie. There's been quite how many interceptions did he have last week?
I'll look it up.
Look it up, because I feel like it was a lot, and his play wasn't great. Now, at the same time, though, it's at Detroit, and their defense is a good defense. Yeah, Geno Smith is one of those names that, like, it's easy to be like, oh, it's just Geno Smith. When he was with the New York Jets, he was nothing. But man, since he's got to Seattle, he has continually surprised me.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, Josh. We've got one interception out of him last week, out of Jared Goff, but 2 in Tampa Bay the week before. He's got 4 on the season. He's got 1 week 1, 2 week 2, 1 week 3.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what you get with Jared Goff too. And I think that comes like with the territory, is sometimes he's going to make some of those bad throws. I like the Seahawks in this one. I'm not going to count out Dan Campbell and the Lions, of course. But I think with Tariq Woolen and Devon Witherspoon on the outside, they have the cornerbacks that can kind of match up well with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. And then their rookie defensive tackle is off to a strong start to the season, Byron Murphy II. I don't know if there's any like injury news on him, but he's a guy that can disrupt the run game enough, perhaps, that it can keep the Seahawks in the game. But I like the Lions defense too. I think Terrion Arnold, the rookie corner, has been like a revelation for them. He played well against the Cardinals receivers last week. And I think like this game could go any which way. It could be an offensive shootout, but the defenses have been much improved over the last couple of seasons, that it could also be like a 20-17, boxing match between these two.
Yeah. So that's Seattle. So you've gone through Pittsburgh and Seattle.
Let's hit up Minnesota next. I'm going to start with Jared. I think we know Jared or Josh's opinion. I think we know my opinion. So
don't look to me to break the tie, guys. Don't look to me to break the tie.
I'll let Josh go first.
Yeah. So in the brief history that Kevin O'Connell and Matt LaFleur have gone up against one another as head coaches, it's kind of been punch, counter punch throughout the season. Like the Vikings have won pretty handedly in the first game of the season that they played against one another. And then the Packers have responded and won even more handedly in the second game. And that was with the first game, one being at home for Minnesota, one being away at Lambeau Field. So it hasn't mattered where they played. I think I like what Brian Flores has been doing on this Minnesota defense. He's very diabolical in a sense. But I think Matt LaFleur as an offensive mind is equally as diabolical. And just an example of that is the first play that that Green Bay ran last week against Tennessee. Everybody is expecting the ball to go to Josh Jacobs because that's what they did against the Colts, and they were able to do it effectively. And Malik Willis was in the game, and so you're gonna run the ball. And on the snap, the center pulls, so it looks like a run. And the linebacker who's supposed to be watching that center sees the center pull. That linebacker, however, is also supposed to be guarding Jaden Reed, and Jaden Reed crosses his face pretty easily because that linebacker bit so hard, gets wide open. Malik Willis gets him for a big gain. Those are the sorts of play designs that Matt LaFleur brings to Green Bay. And I think this game has been won this week in the preparation of what Brian Flores has been preparing to do and the chess match of what Matt LaFleur has been preparing to do. I think whoever has the game plan that gets the upper hand on these guys, whoever has the upper hand on their opponents is going to come in and win that game. And I just, because of the last 2 years, I think that the first punch has been thrown by Minnesota. And because I'm obviously a Vikings homer, I'm going to go with the Vikings winning this one. But the Packers probably winning pretty big later on in the year at US Bank Stadium.
I have a different perspective. Josh, I very much agree with you. Brian Flores, a mastermind on the defensive side. But I do think that the Packers added their own defensive mastermind in Jeff Hafley this offseason. As Matthew and listeners of this podcast well know, Joe Barry
was not scary.
Oh my gosh. I could go. I thought about dressing as Joe Barry for Halloween and just have people avoid me. I live in Wisconsin now. If you dress as Joe Barry, you know people are just not going to interact with you. You are shunned from the society up here. Okay.
Is his dress that iconic?
Yes. And it was so frustrating. And some of those punches that Minnesota provided us was Preston Smith was the primary cornerback against Justin Jefferson. 100% of the time, Preston Smith is not going to win that matchup. I can promise you that. And then the counterpunch that Josh talked about is when we had Jair Alexander lining up against Justin Jefferson. And Josh remembers Jair had 7 targets thrown towards him for 0 completions. A great defensive game by Jair, where the first time we had played that season, a terrible defensive game by Preston Smith. These are mistakes we have not seen Jeff Hafley make. We've added Xavier McKinney, who's had 3 interceptions in 3 games. The Packers are leading the NFL right now in takeovers, I believe, something we have not done in a long time. And we had 8 sacks last week. This defense is also coming out with a similar defensive X factor mindset where every player is contributing at such a high level right now. I think it's going to be harder each week for teams to try to scheme up stuff to go against it. Now, a player that I have very mixed feelings about seeing play on Sunday is Aaron Jones. You know, longtime Green Bay Packers running back, did excellent for the organization. He put out a letter early this week to the Packers organization, thanking them for everything they had done. He said, "I may not have a G on my helmet this Sunday, but it'll always be in my heart." Like right to the heart of every Packers fan, exactly what he needed to say. And all of us want Aaron Jones to do exceptionally well. If the Packers are going to win this game, what needs to happen is you just need to limit Sam Darnold's every possibility to do anything. He just cannot have options. And right now, every week, he's had really good options and he's made really smart quarterback play. You just need to take that away from him and then trust that your interior defensive line and your linebackers are going to stop the run. Against Aaron Jones, those players specifically know, going up against him in practice over the past 5 seasons, it's not an easy task. But they have some sort of familiarity there. I'm going to give it to the Packers. I think it's going to be the first game we've seen between the O'Connell-LaFleur era where it's not a blowout. I think it's going to be a close game. And both offenses are going to be executing at a high level.
I'm gonna add to what you guys say without necessarily trying to break your tie because you guys have landed on opposite sides. We'll see. I might, but I'll say this: 1, Aaron Jones has said he's got a Lambeau leap in mind, so just be ready. I've heard that.
It's going to be welcome too. I mean, the Packers fans want Aaron Jones in the stands.
And 2, I think a lot's going to ride on Jordan Love. Jordan Love had an ankle injury. Is that right?
Knee officially.
Knee. So it's in the leg. It's in the movement, and we know that he's pretty good at kind of rolling out and keeping a play alive and throwing. And when the Colts were playing them, if they could have stopped the run, it would have been a whole different game because Malik Willis is not your big passer. He can do a little bit here and there. If we would have been against Jordan Love, it would have been, I think, worse because he can just throw it all over the field. And it would have made it really hard because in Indianapolis, our cornerbacks were really young and they're still learning. But I think a lot's going to depend on what kind of pass rush they get on Jordan Love, how much they pressure him and make him move, make him throw before he's ready. And then Aaron Jones on the other side being there with Sam Darnold. I think there's question marks in the air for me as far as like how much Jordan Love is going to contribute. If he gets in there and contributes a lot, I think it's going to be a long day for Minnesota. If he isn't necessarily where he was before, if he's a little tender on his leg, if he can't move like he did, if there's rust, that kind of thing, I think Green Bay's going to have a tougher day. And so I think we're going to leave this one up in the air. I'm not going to decide right here on the air, and we're gonna see what happens. But I guess we're trying to decide which 3-0 team goes undefeated the longest. So maybe we'll come back to this one if this is still one of our candidates, and maybe I'll make a choice there.
All right. Well, let's hit up. We've got 2 teams left. Let's go Chiefs Chargers. I'll start with this one. I alluded to the history that we've had between these 2 teams since Justin Herbert's been in the league. Starting, I think against the Chiefs was actually his first start when Tyrod Taylor had a punctured lung from the doctor. He went out there and just blew up that field with his giant arm. I think the Chiefs win this game. I think they continue on their streak. I know we talked about Justin Herbert with his injury. They've also lost some offensive firepower. Obviously, Keenan Allen traded to the Bears. Mike Williams is now a New York Jet. Their team just physically looks different with the firepower they previously had, and I don't think they fully gelled together yet. I like Kansas City in this matchup. They still have a really solid defense that's going to be able to stop. I think Kansas City goes 4-0.
Unfortunately, I think I'm going to agree with you there. I don't like Kansas City. I think everyone in here knows. I always drafted Travis Kelce in my fantasy team, and he always did great. This year, he's not been doing so great because I didn't draft him. But I don't know if it's a because in that situation. But I think he's going to find his groove with Mahomes here real soon. And then, anybody who had a chance to do something, it's going to get a lot harder. But yeah, unfortunately, I think Kansas City is probably going to win this one again this week, much to my chagrin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll go 3-0 on the 4-0 soon to be 4-0 Chiefs. Because I mean, if Justin Herbert is in the game, I don't think he's going to play. Like having injured that same ankle like 2 weeks in a row, like you gotta.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're Jim Harbaugh, you got to let him rest and kind of rely on the run game a little bit. I don't trust Taylor Heineke to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. If they go with Easton Stick, I don't trust him to beat the Kansas City Chiefs even more so. And like one of these weeks, the Chiefs are going to be explosive, are finally going to find their footing on offense. They have been very, I don't know if it's just being patient right now or not, but like it seems like one of these weeks their offense isn't going to be like a tire in the mud. It's finally gonna hit where the rubber meets the road, and they're going to be able to get big plays to Travis Kelce, get big plays to Xavier Worthy. And like Carson Steele was good in the run game, filling in for Isaiah Pacheco. They might get Kareem Hunt back as well. So, I mean, not back, but like get him off of the practice squad. So that might force Patrick Mahomes to have to throw a little bit more. But again, if Justin Herbert is in the game, like Chris Jones can wreak havoc up the middle, and he has a straight line to the quarterback through the center. And I don't think Justin Herbert is going to escape that too often just because of that bum ankle.
Yeah. And the last thing you want is to keep putting him out there and then have a season ending thing, because it's like you said, Heineke, it's not your answer. For the year.
And Joe Alt also might miss this game too. He suffered an injury. Their rookie right tackle that has been extremely good so far this season. He suffered an injury against Pittsburgh last week, and he might not be there. So that's another guy that you're down on offense. Like it is not looking good for the Chargers this week.
All right. Well, we've been waiting all podcast for Sunday night, where we have Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens. I purposely saved this one for last for the reason of the Ravens looked really, really good last week. And we can go into the Dallas Cowboys frauds. We can talk about that later.
Oh, I like talking about that.
But the Ravens were one of those teams last week that were defeated. And Matthew and I talked about them. How long are they going to be defeated for? Similar to this segment right here, just reverse for teams that haven't won yet. They pulled out their first win. On the other side, the Buffalo Bills looked like the best team in the NFL last week. They went in and just wiped the snot out of their opponents, which is what you're supposed to do as a really, really good team.
Now, it was the Jaguars. Who did they play last week?
Yeah, they played the Jaguars.
Yeah, so I mean, you gotta factor that in a little bit too.
But
they look like the best team in football against the 0-3 Jaguars.
But I do factor that in. But halftime being 34-3. I mean, if you're a really good football team, you have to go in and just wipe the snot out of your opponents. If it's a close game against the opponents, I can understand the argument. But if you go in and wipe the snot out, that's a really good football team. And so the Ravens have not looked great so far this year. We thought the Bills were going to take a step back with Stephon Diggs leaving and their receiving room looking different. They haven't. And Josh Allen's been playing really well. I don't think Josh Allen's made a turnover-worthy play so far this year. Let me look that up. But that's really been the key to what Josh Allen has been doing this year. We know he's been a historically turnover-prone quarterback in the past, and that's helped lead to some of the Bills' downfall. But he's been playing a lot smarter so far this year. This year, he has 75% completion rate, 634 yards, 7 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 133.7 passer rating. He's looked phenomenal.
That's good.
What do you think? And the Bills have been getting it done in different ways in all three of their games. And then, granted, they've played the Cardinals, they've played the Dolphins without Tua for half of the game, and then they played like we said, the Jaguars. So they haven't been like super tested based on their opponent, but like that first game of the season, they have a comeback victory. They are tested by the Cardinals, who go up and take a early, I think 14-0 lead. And then Josh Allen leads them on the comeback trail. Those are the teams that you believe in, those teams that have faced adversity, have responded to the adversity. And that's what Buffalo was able to do in game 1. Week 2, they don't go to Josh Allen as much. They keep it on the ground for the majority of the game against an explosive Miami defense or offense to keep it away from Tua and Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. And James Cook gets the job done. And then last week, you see him score on their first 5 possessions of the game with Josh Allen just doing prime Josh Allen things. I think the Ravens are going to be their first real test. I think the Ravens are much better than their 1-2 record suggests. But I like this Buffalo Bills team, maybe like to finally break through this year and get the first Super Bowl for Buffalo, just because Josh Allen, like you said, Brandon, he has been just so good at not turning the ball over. And he's still getting those explosive plays, even without Stephon Diggs being on the team this year. So it's just incredible what Buffalo's been able to do. Credit to that coaching staff, credit to all those guys. Like Lamar Jackson's going to be tough for them to slow down, but Buffalo's defense has looked equally as good as their offense this season. So I am putting a lot of faith in the Buffalo Bills to also be 4-0 after this week.
Yeah, when Derrick Henry went to the Baltimore Ravens with Lamar Jackson, I remember thinking, man, this is going to be huge. And it's taken them some time to get that going the way it should. As we said, they didn't, win the first 2 weeks. Last week, man, Henry just looked like the longer he went in that game, the stronger he got. And they looked like they were starting to click. And so if there is a week that I'm like a little bit nervous to so I would also say, I think Buffalo just looks great. But if there's a week that I'm like, oh my goodness, is this going to be the week? It could be this week, but I'm not sure the Baltimore Ravens quite have it all together, even though they looked stronger last week. And I'm going to give it to the Buffalo Bills also this week. I think it's going to be tougher though. I think this probably why you saved this one to last. This would be like the matchup I think of this week that is really needed. If I was going to watch one game, this might be the one aside from my Colts. So.
Yeah, and I think Josh and I are biased to our homer teams. Josh is looking for Vikings to go 4-0. I'm looking for the Packers to win. They have the tiebreaker, and then they're the top of the North at that point. We're going different ways, but I do think out of this, the most intriguing game is going to be Buffalo, Baltimore.
And so, just real quickly, I know we talked about. I'm going to read their next 5 opponents. Buffalo has Baltimore, which we talked about. Then Houston, then New York Jets, then Tennessee, then Seattle. Okay, that's their next 5. Pittsburgh has Indy, then Dallas, then Las Vegas, the Raiders, then the Jets, then the Giants. Not as rough looking. Kansas City has Los Angeles Chargers, New Orleans, San Francisco, Las Vegas, Tampa Bay. Minnesota has Green Bay, New York Jets, then a bye week. Man, they have an early bye week. Mm-hmm. Then Detroit, then Rams. I'm like LAR. I always have to think about the Rams, and then Indy. If you want to like put one on, that's their, since they have a bye week in there. And then Seattle has Detroit, New York Giants, San Francisco, Atlanta, and Buffalo. So looking at kind of their next 5 out, which one of these teams, we've said it before here, when we talked through this, basically we all felt maybe Pittsburgh, well, when I say we all, 2 of us, I think, thought Pittsburgh might lose. And then each of you, one of you thought Minnesota would lose. And one of you thought Seattle would lose. But we said Buffalo would win, Kansas City would win, maybe Seattle would win, maybe Minnesota. So we still had a lot of undefeated teams, possibly. Which one goes longest?
Let's start with Buffalo. So, we all agree we think that's going to be a close game. I think they still pull out a win this week. I think it's closer. Then who do they have next week?
Houston.
I think what we just saw against Minnesota, Houston's had pretty much a layup of a schedule. No offense, Matthew, so far this season, where they could go.
They only won by 2 on us, guys. Let's just relax.
Well, hold on. That's what I'm talking about. I don't think they're as much of a threat as we think. And then look at their game against Chicago, the same thing. And then they go into Minnesota, and we see Minnesota just manhandle them. That's what you're supposed to do if you're Minnesota. I think they're a little bit under where we think they should be, just given their opponents so far. I think Buffalo still goes in and beats Houston pretty handily.
I think last year they were just kind of a surprise, and in everybody's mind they went just a little higher than they really are. What they're going to be this year. Everybody's like, oh, they're probably going to be in the Super Bowl. It's like, okay, relax. They got 9 wins, and on one play, it could have been Indy winning that division and them completely out last year on that 4th and 2 throw that was behind. Anyway, I think next they have the Jets.
The Jets, I think this is going to be one of their bigger challenges. Their defense is coming together a bit stronger. Their offense is coming together slowly but surely, with Aaron Rodgers on the team. This is finally what they're wanting it to be. I know week 1 was rough for the Jets, but then they handily won their next 2 games, and they've looked good while they've done it. I think for the division, it's going to come down to these 2 teams, New York and Buffalo. Right now, Buffalo is just riding this high of undefeated, but New York's only lost 1 game in week 1 when you're not supposed to overreact, and everyone did. And so Buffalo, New York, I think, do you know where it is? Is it in New York or is it in Buffalo?
I would have to look.
Because if it's in New York, I'm giving the nod to the Jets. And I think that's going to be their first loss.
It is in New York or New Jersey.
New Jersey. Yeah. That's my vote. MetLife is going to be their first loss of the season.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the Bills, I think they're the best team out. I even think they're better than the Chiefs. I think right now they're the best team in the NFL, but I think that they are not going to be the team that goes undefeated the longest, because that stretch of 3 games and then even having the Seahawks after that, those are well-coached teams. I think one of them, like just probability wise, one of them is going to get the better of Buffalo, like whether that's the Ravens this week, the Texans the week after or the Jets after that. Like I'd be surprised if it's the Titans. That would be shocking, but that three, I think one of those teams has the ability to get the upper hand. And that's why I don't think Buffalo for me would be the one that goes undefeated the longest.
Which one do you think would be?
I like the Seahawks. I think they're going to win against the Lions this week. And I think like the schedule, especially if they can get past the Lions, like their defense has been so good this season with bringing the defensive coordinator over from the Ravens to be their head coach. Then it goes the Giants. You said, like, I think that's a win. And the 49ers aren't at full strength. And then the Falcons, like, I think that Bills Seahawks game, that could be the game that decides like which one of these teams is undefeated the longest. And I just really like what the Seattle Seahawks are doing. I think their offense had, like, it took a step back last year, and then this year it's gotten back up to speed. And Jackson Smith and Jigba has like flourished as a second option. And then if you have Tyler Lockett as your third option for Geno Smith, like good luck to everybody else. And they still don't have Kenneth Walker like back yet. It's been Zach Charbonnet who hasn't looked great in the run game. Once Walker's back, like that team will be rolling on all cylinders. And their defense has just been fantastic this season. So I'm going to go with the Seahawks.
I will say this. It would be most exciting if Buffalo and Seattle continued to be undefeated until week 8, and you had 2 7-0 teams going at it because they play each other. That would be,
when's that game slated to be? Because I'm going to argue if it's a midday game, if it's a noon game, that it's going to be bumped to prime time. If they're undefeated, still undefeated, I would argue that.
Yeah, sure.
I would too. I can't remember. Is there a time that flex comes into play, or is flex all year? Because I felt like it was like later in the season they could begin to flex some games, but maybe it's all year.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I think maybe we'd have seen some games get flexed at this point, perhaps like for week 5 or week 6 if it had. But I think it's a little bit later in the year when that starts. But I think that game might be around that point.
Yeah, I think it would be if they're both undefeated and they're the last 2 undefeated teams.
Because this would be week 8, right? That's a third of the way through the season.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we will leave that there for a minute, and then we're going to come to this one. Which 0-win team goes the longest before getting a win? There's only 3 of these. This should be easier. We got the Bengals, we got the Jags, and we got the Tennessee Titans.
All right. I'm going to go out here without a ton of information off the top of my head. If the Titans are starting Will Levis, it's them.
I agree 100%. 100%. They have just looked bad.
Well, because the game plan against Will Levis is so easy if you're a defense. Don't cover anyone, blitz. That's the game plan. Will Levis will still throw an interception. Maybe not that extreme, but it's really an easy game plan for Will Levis. He has not been developed properly. And we've just seen this with the Titans. They're just throwing a young guy in, they're saying a prayer, and then that prayer is not answered because the answer to their prayer was developed, and they did not. And if they keep him in there, if I were them, I'd go get one of these veteran guys and just start him. Similar to a team that just won their first game that we thought might just be going defeated all season, the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah.
They just threw Andy Dalton in. Matthew and I talked about it. We liked this move for them last week, and it turned out to be beneficial. And we liked it because we know Andy Dalton's a competent NFL quarterback that's played well. In my opinion, I thought the Bears started Justin Fields too early. Andy Dalton was still playing at a really high level for Chicago when they put Justin Fields in when Matt Nagy's hands were tied with their biggest secret. They throw him in, and he got sacked 9 times in his first game against a Cleveland defense that was not yet good. Like, you cannot tell me that was the right move for the organization. And I think the stock on some of these veteran quarterbacks is going up. We've seen the NFL, and Josh, you weren't here for my rant last week. I don't know if you listened to the podcast, but the NFL is just throwing young players in too soon under the disguise of they just need to get a game time feel. They're not developing them. and they're just throwing them in and hoping that they can play. Their last experience playing was in the Pac-12, maybe the Big 12. Not all of them were SEC quarterbacks. And Tom Brady came out in an interview recently and said, the issue with young quarterbacks today is when they get to college, they're not developing as a quarterback. The NFL's developing them as a quarterback. They're not working on their footwork. They're not working on their reads. They're not learning how to read defenses. And they're just going in and hoping that they're going to work out. They've completely skipped the development part of young quarterbacks, which led me into saying is why Sam Darnold's having so much success in Minnesota, because he hopped around the league. He was a guy drafted really, really young. He's not an old quarterback by any means, but he's been around the NFL for a while. They've just thrown him to different teams. And when he got to San Francisco as a quarterback, as a backup quarterback, was the first time they developed him. And when he got, I don't know if he was cut or traded, and Minnesota picked him up, he's now had quarterback development. But when we saw him as a New York Jet, he had no development. He was just a guy running for his life, which is what's led to his success. And it's just something we don't see in the NFL right now. Bryce Young needs that. Will Levis desperately needs that. And if Tennessee is going to continue this trend, they need to just get a guy in there. It could be Kurt Benkert. I mean, he's not phenomenal, but he can read an NFL defense, and he has decent footwork, and he's cheaper.
Yeah, well, they have Mason Rudolph as their backup quarterback. I don't want to see any more Mason Rudolph in the NFL. So I would agree that they need to bring somebody in if they are going to make that move. I don't know if they necessarily have to. I do at times like Will Levis, because on that first drive against the Packers, he made some like decent throws. And then of course on his second drive, the very next play, he throws like the easiest pick six that Jair Alexander has had since middle school, probably. Like it went right to him. He like punked him the whole way, like read his eyes. So he's a guy that
was the fifth longest touchdown of week 3.
Yeah,
like in the NFL, the fifth longest touchdown was Jair's pick six.
And he like, and it's so fascinating to watch him play, because it is car wreck. Like it is like, you want to see what he's going to do next in the bad way. And he's made a big flub every single week. I think like he has the talent and does need to develop, because he's made some good throws. I wasn't big on him coming out of college, but I've kind of changed my tenor on that a little bit. I still don't think he's going to be like an elite game-changing quarterback, even if he does develop. But I do think the Titans get a win this week, because the team they're playing is the Miami Dolphins, who might not have Skylar Thompson, who Tyler Huntley probably isn't ready to join that offense yet. So that means it's going to be Tim Boyle, who is basically in the league because he's like a savant when it comes to quarterback play and like offensive, like just knowing the game, but like he can't execute that well on the field. Like even in college, his numbers at the FBS level when he was at UConn was 1 touchdown and 13 interceptions throughout his entire career. Like he's there because he elevates the collective football IQ of the quarterback room of whatever team that he's on. He's almost like a second coach. But if you have to see him on Monday night going against the Titans, I think the Titans are gonna love that. And even with Will Levis's flubs, their first 2 games of the season, they had leads, and it was just an exceptional effort by the Bears defense / an exceptional effort by Will Levis's inner demons to get the Bears back into the game. And then obviously Aaron Rodgers did a great job again, leading and rallying his team. So like they've been close in some of these games, even with Will Levis not playing very, very well. I think just because of their schedule, I think they're probably the worst 0-3 team out of the teams, but I think because they're catching the Dolphins at a really rough time for Miami, that they do end up getting a win this week.
That's interesting, because flipping to one of the other 0-3 teams, the Bengals, I could see them going 0-4 because Andy Dalton coming in and doing a really good job against his old team, having some little extra sauce ready for that game. And boy, how sad would that be to be the Bengals and be 0-4 and have the Titans have a win?
Well, right now the problem with the Bengals is their defense. We saw last week their offense is obviously not the problem. They scored over 30 points in a game, something that's harder to do in the NFL now, but you give up. What did they lose? It was like a 5-point loss or 2-point loss, 33-35, somewhere in that
Yeah,
in that
38,
range.
33. Yeah, they got
38, 33. Yeah,
Against the Commanders, right?
Yeah, and the Commanders, are not the spotlight team for NFL offense, right?
Although Josh Haupt would tell you that they're the only team. What was the graphic he put up? The only team in the NFL era that's had no punts and
Hold on, I'll pull it up. It's not quite the only team, but I know what you're going for. I can pull it up really quick. Let me find it.
That game was the only game that there were no punts and no turnovers since 1940. It might be the stat, the game between the Bengals and the
Yes.
Commanders.
Yep.
So it's back-to-back games with 0 turnovers and 0 punts. The first time in the Super Bowl era.
Oh wow,
Back to
That's the one I
games.
was thinking about. Yeah.
And then the other one he put up here: games where an NFL team has scored on every drive, excluding kneel downs. The Washington Commanders, since Jaden Daniels has started, this is 3-game sample size, has had two of those. If you combine every game of Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Drew Brees, and Peyton Manning, that's 1,094 starts, and they also have 2.
oh wow.
And
So
Josh
is super high right now.
Josh is our Josh Haupt is our
Josh
hype
Haupt.
man.
Other Josh.
For random miscellaneous NFL stats that really don't amount to much. But
On a Tuesday when no one sneezed, this team did the
yeah, and the Gatorade was orange. This happened.
I think the Bengals could very much lose that game as well. They generated, even with Trey Hendrickson, they generated no pass rush against a Washington offensive line that is pretty suspect. And if you can't get a pass rush, like Jaden Daniels was able to pick them apart. Pretty much Will Levis would be able to pick them apart. And by the way, the only quarterback that has thrown for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in the same game this year is Andy Dalton, and it's his revenge. He can end the Bengals season effectively by beating his former team, and that's definitely going to be on his mind. Now they'll be without Adam Thielen, who was put on IR, but Xavier Legette, he's a rookie that I am just super high on and think that he can have a big game. And then Deontay Johnson was just a monster last week for them. So I think that the Bengals are definitely in the danger zone right now.
Yeah. I would love for the Jacksonville Jaguars to beat their opponent, which is the Houston Texans, because that would then put Colts, if they beat Pittsburgh, a lot of ifs here, put them in a tie for first place. But I can also take a little solace in that if Jacksonville loses, I had so many people telling me, oh, you guys are all sleeping on Jacksonville. They're going to be much better than you think. They're going to be much better than you think. I don't think that's true. And I don't know exactly why. I don't know what's happening with Trevor Lawrence. He just hasn't looked good this year.
I have a one-word answer for that.
Yeah.
Development.
Could be. Now, he came in his first, remember, he had Urban Meyer. So he had a rough start. But then when he got Doug Peterson, I thought things were going to get better. And for that first year with Doug Peterson, they looked pretty good.
They did get better. They did get better. But there's so much development as a quarterback that I think is just missing. And another rant I had last week, Josh, was the idea of a
We've got a weird thing going on with your microphone there.
Is that me or is?
I think that's something happened with his computer. He's going to fix that real quick.
Oh, gotcha.
And then he's going to come back. I muted him because we didn't want to hear that rolling R. He's working on his Spanish broadcast.
Oh man, that's fantastic. Like Trevor Lawrence is just like an enigma because 2022 was such a good season for him. And then 2023, like granted, he did deal with injuries at the last half and was probably playing in games that he shouldn't have been playing in at the end of the season and looked bad in those games. But this year, assumedly, he's injury free. And like he has a really good rookie wide receiver in Brian Thomas. Like he has Travis Etienne that should be helping him out in the run game. And just like they haven't been able to get anything going. And then their defense has been just as concerning. You give up I mean, you give up touchdown drives on the first 5 drives like you did on Monday night. It doesn't matter who you have back there at quarterback. You're going to lose that. You're going to lose that game probably.
Yeah. Are you back with us, Brandon?
I am. Anytime I get a phone call, it disconnects all of my equipment automatically.
The internet age problems we have.
Yeah. I heard about 5% of what you guys said.
It was all gold. You missed it.
I'll go back. I'll go back and check the tape. But like one thing, they played Buffalo last week, right? We talked about that.
Yes.
Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence made a number of just terrible reads in that game that I tie directly to his development as a quarterback. Overthrowing receivers for interceptions. DeMar Hamlin, a stat that Josh cares about, the first guy to come back from the dead to have an interception in the NFL, was thrown by Trevor Lawrence, this generational guy. My opinion is your first 3 years in the NFL should be like harking development. Even if you are the starting quarterback, you got to have some guru quarterback coach. Teams need to spend out the wazoo for this guy to come in and just focus on, this is how we're going to read defenses that are disguising themselves, because that's what every defense in the NFL is doing right now, is disguising coverages. You need to understand how to do that. You need to understand how to make basic throws, and you need to understand how to throw in the pocket and outside of the pocket. Those things, I think you're going to be just fine. But they need to hit that so hard in your first 3 years in the NFL, starting or on the bench.
And Doug Peterson was a guy that got the most out of Carson Wentz in Philadelphia. And we've seen what happened to Carson Wentz when he didn't have Doug Peterson. So like, he should be, you'd think, the guy that could get Trevor Lawrence to whatever level he needs to get to make this Jaguars team relevant again. But it just, like, he's on the hot seat. Everybody there is on the hot seat right now. And another one of these, I just wanted to throw in while we're talking about 0-3 teams, like these useless stats. The 3 0-3 teams. Bengals are coached by Zach Taylor. The Titans are coached by Zach Taylor's old offensive coordinator, Brian Callahan. And the offensive coordinator of the Jaguars is Zach Taylor's brother, Press Taylor. So it's the Zach Taylor coaching tree has made this, has wrecked a few NFL teams so far to start the season.
Yeah, I think I don't even think we have to wait till the end of the year. I was going to say at the end of the year, but I think probably right now, all the Tennessee Titan fans are like, why did we let Mike Vrabel go? I know he had a down year, but why was it we let Mike Vrabel go again? Yeah, that's going to haunt them. So, well, I think that's enough for our 3-0s and our 0-3s. We'll watch. We'll keep an eye on them. We'll see where we go with week 4. But let's move to our marquee manure and my oh my games. This is something we do every week where we talk about, like, this is the game this week that I think everybody needs to be watching, and here's why. And then that's the marquee. The manure, I don't think anybody needs to watch this game at all. Don't even tune in. It's going to be so bad. And then the my oh my. This is a game that I think might be surprising. Might make me say, my oh my, look at that. And so let's kind of go through those. And we're going to let our co-host here have first precedent all the way through so that he doesn't have to like repeat anything we say. We have to repeat what he says if they come out the same. Josh, we're going to start with you on your marquee game. What's the game this week everybody should watch?
I think the game this week that everyone should watch is going to be the Cardinals game against the Commanders. I think from just like the football perspective, if you love high flying offenses, this is going to be the game for you. One, because both of these offenses have been good. We talked about the stats about the no punts and the no turnovers thing and all the drives that the Commanders have scored on. On the opposite end, they're going to be in a lot of these shootouts because they don't really have anyone that can cover wide receivers. Like, their cornerbacks, their secondary is just very, very bad. Like, that's something that Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Greg Dortch for Arizona can take advantage of. And then from like a narrative perspective, like, there's a lot of things going on with this Arizona game. So there's a song by Olivia Rodrigo called Deja Vu. And in this song, for anybody that is not up to date on pop culture, Olivia Rodrigo is lamenting the fact that her ex-boyfriend has this new girlfriend, and he is taking this new girlfriend like on all of the dates that he used to take her out on, and doing all of these like special things. And it's kind of this like this envious song, but also like this sad song and a bit of like petulance in there as well. And I imagine that Kyler Murray this week is waking up and listening to Deja Vu on repeat all throughout the day, all throughout practice, because he is seeing the headlines of what Jaden Daniels is doing and how just great he's been to start the season, and especially last week with the coming out party there. And who's his offensive coordinator? It's Cliff
Kingsbury.
Yeah. And Kyler Murray sees, oh my gosh, Cliff Kingsbury, he used to do that with me. You made me into the superstar quarterback. Like, it's like that, and that's gonna, bite at him a little bit. And so I think that's an intriguing part. And then, Cliff Kingsbury, he didn't leave Arizona on his own accord. He was so heartbroken by leaving that he left the country the next day. He went out to Thailand for like a month after he was fired from the Arizona Cardinals. So like, he has some revenge. And then Jaden Daniels, he was a quarterback at ASU in Tempe, Arizona, which is 20 miles away from State Farm Stadium. And he had a good start to his career. And then the last 2 seasons that he was at ASU before he transferred, like, he was very much maligned by the fans and by like teammates. There was a video when he announced his transfer of his teammates in the locker room saying like, oh, you're like, not to him, but like pointing at his locker and saying, oh yeah, we're glad to get this guy out of here. So he's got like a chip on his shoulder with some of these Arizona fans that didn't necessarily treat him the best at the end of his career there. So all of those narratives pouring in, and then the fact that these 2 teams could be wild card teams, and this head-to-head game could like very well decide perhaps the 7th or 6th seed in the NFC. Like that's another angle of it. I'm really excited for that one.
Well, that's going to be fun. And it's fun to bring out all those narrative storylines that are going on between those 2 teams. And Olivia Rodriguez, who would have thought? I'm going to go next because I've already kind of alluded to the game that I said I'm going to be watching apart from the Indianapolis-Pittsburgh game, and that is Buffalo-Baltimore. I just really want to see where's Baltimore? Are they real? Was that a fluke at the beginning? Can they do this? Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, are they this year going to like really push? Is their window closing like everybody keeps saying, or is it not a fact? So Buffalo, Baltimore, I think those are 2 powerhouses. I want to see how that turns out. And that's Sunday night. That's a good game everybody should watch. What about you, Brandon?
I'm going to go the second Monday Night Football game, Seattle at Detroit. And I talked about this a little bit. Seattle's undefeated going into Detroit. And if there's a team that can stop them, that defies every odd, it's whatever Dan Campbell draws up, wherever he is. I know his phone number was leaked. His house address was leaked.
Jeez,
he picked up everything. He changed his cell phone, bought a new house, moved into a new house. And
Really?
he's going out and just changing everything about his life. Because
Wow.
he just didn't want people to know that information. And I just love the attitude he brings to this Detroit team. I think, in my opinion, he's the best head coach they've hired in the Super Bowl era.
I agree.
And he's just going to go in and defy every odd every week. And the game is not going to be over until the scoreboard says 0. Like with Dan Campbell, they could be down 50. He does not care.
And
he is going to go out
when
there and
when it's starting to say 0, he might not let it. He's like the Chuck Norris of coaches, right?
Yeah.
The scoreboard doesn't say 0 until Dan Campbell says it can say 0, or he'll bite its kneecaps off.
And so I love the upside that this team brings every week. I'm never writing them out of a game as long as Dan Campbell's on the sideline coaching. That's my marquee game for this week.
Good marquee games all around. How about the manure game I wouldn't even tune in for? What do you got, Josh?
Yeah, we mentioned this one a little bit earlier too. I like Skylar Thompson's probably not going to play for the Miami Dolphins this week, and I have no interest in watching Tim Boyle play quarterback. Like that Dolphins offense is a Lamborghini, and but the engine, if Tim Boyle or Skylar Thompson is in there, is like those batteries from those cars that you get for your 3-year-old kid that go up to 1.5 miles per hour. And Tua has his faults, but he can get that thing up to 70 on the freeway at the very least. So I am not excited to see that Dolphins offense or the Titans offense for that matter, because I mean, outside of the car wreck factor, to see what Will Levis does, and the fact that there's another Monday night game that you can watch that Brandon just mentioned makes that even more so the case. Like I'm going to be ignoring this one and just like looking at the live look-ins that they do on ESPN or ABC for those doubleheaders.
Yeah. I'm gonna let Brandon go next so he doesn't have to follow me every time.
My manure game this week is going to be Cowboys Giants, and I say that Dallas is in a slump right now. I do not see that changing this week. I know they're playing the Giants. I've heard it. The Giants have one giant X factor working for them, and that is Malik Neighbors, and that's it. And he can make amazing plays, and I guarantee he's going to make amazing plays. Cowboys also have people that can make amazing plays. We've seen CD out there time and time again do this. I think right now he's the highest paid receiver in the NFL with his new recent contract deal. I just don't foresee the Cowboys getting out there and doing anything exciting. And I also don't see the Giants getting out there and doing anything exciting outside of those two players. And yeah, there'll be 2 or 3 highlight reels. I can find those on YouTube later. I do have Malik Neighbors on my fantasy team. I'll be watching the score of that. But outside of fantasy, I'm not tuning into this game. And that's tonight, by the way. That's tonight's game.
Yep, that's the Thursday night game. So you guys picked 2 that I probably would have put in my high spots there, probably in order. But I'm going to go with a different game just for variety here, and I'm going to go with Cleveland Raiders, the Browns Raiders, just because.
Smart.
Cleveland. Every year they're like, Deshaun Watson is going to come back and he's going to lead this team, and we all. I think everybody knows this was probably the most overpaid big mistake ever made. This $230 million guaranteed on a guy who had so many legal troubles going on, and then he comes back and he doesn't even play great. Man, that's got to hurt. And then on the other side of that, the Raiders, I do love Gardner Minshew. When he was in Jacksonville, I don't like Jacksonville, but I was always like, that guy, he's like an Uncle Rico. I like that guy. And then he came to Indy, and it's like, hey, that's our Uncle Rico. I like that guy. And he kind of helped us when Anthony Richardson was out earlier than expected and did a good job. And I like that he, put it on the Cowboys. Was that the team they destroyed? Wasn't that the Las Vegas? No?
The Raiders, their win was against the Ravens, and they came back from
Ravens.
Okay. The 10-point deficit in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, even though he's done some stuff, and I've been like, yay. I look at that team, and I just don't see them utilizing their pieces well. It just seems like they have Devontae Adams, for goodness sakes, and you just don't ever hear Devontae Adams' name being said. That's a heresy. That shouldn't be happening. And so anyway, I'm not real excited to watch Browns Las Vegas either, but I would probably say my top game would be that Tennessee-Miami game. But we're going to do that for variety purposes. Let's move on to the My Oh My. What game might be surprising that you're interested in watching this week, Josh?
I want to see the Jets and Broncos, and let's take it back a couple of years where Sean Payton gets hired by the Broncos, and he says, "Oh, this place was a mess. This place was a disaster when I got here, and whoever coached this, how are they in the league?" And well, the guy that coached them is Nathaniel Hackett, and he's the offensive coordinator of the New York Jets, and they played last year, and the Jets won that game, but Aaron Rodgers, who had been with Nathaniel Hackett in Green Bay for so many years, and the reason that the Jets brought him over, one of the reasons was so that it would be a more lucrative destination for Aaron Rodgers to be at. I'm assuming those two are pretty buddy. I don't know, Brandon, you could probably say more to that, but I sense Aaron Rodgers has kept that in his back of mind since that those comments were made. And I think it is just going to be the Jets completely blasting the Broncos out of MetLife Stadium. They're going to punt them out. Each and every one of them is going to be punted out over the goalposts, over the upper bleachers, and they are going to never want to play football again. Like Bo Nix is going to retire after this game because it's going to be so bad that Aaron Rodgers, the havoc that him and Nathaniel Hackett are about to wreak on this Denver Broncos team and Sean Payton.
Yeah, and the Broncos like handily beat Tampa Bay last week, and everybody's like, Bo Nix. But I think you're right. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to kind of put the kibosh on the Bo Nix talk for this week. So that's a good one. What about you, Brandon?
I'm going to go Homer here. If you're a complete fan of just chess match football, I think the Vikings-Packers games is where it's going to be at. You have two people from the Shanahan tree operating offenses. You have Brian Flores and Jeff Hafley highly operating defenses. If you just like to watch football game film and watch a chess match go on, this is the game to watch. I'm going to be watching this game. Josh is going to be watching this game, and we're going to be thinking, oh my gosh, one of us is going to think this. Our team is so dumb. Why couldn't we think of that? and it's going to be a really good game. If you're a fan of just pure football and you understand what's happening on the field, this is the game for you to watch. And it's going to be high-powered, high-knowledge football. And that's what I'm most excited about with this Vikings-Packers game.
Man, I should have went before you because that was going to be my game as well. And now I'm like scrambling to give us some variety here in a my. But I agree. I think just for that whole idea of like the North has so long been the Packers just by default. And to have a team that's stepping up and everybody's like, oh, it's going to be the Bears. Well, I don't know that I thought that, and now I think we all see this. Not Detroit has come up to see like three teams at least like really be in contention is an exciting thing. It's when the AFC South used to be so bad, everybody laughed every time you talked about AFC South. That's no fun. But when you got three, maybe and possibly four teams that are like in the conversation, I think you guys only have three. I don't think the Bears are in that conversation yet, but having three makes it exciting. And, these early games set up the later game revenge that has to come, like you guys were talking about before. And so that would have been my choice. If I were going to pick another game as a my, trying to pick a game we haven't picked yet for something, because I obviously look at that Arizona.
I think Eagles Buccaneers would be interesting, Matthew. Two teams that have proven everything and two teams that have also dropped the ball so far this season. Be interesting to see which teams
played the playoffs against each other last year too.
Yeah. I feel like Philadelphia getting Saquon Barkley was like a cheat. It was just they were already good in so many ways, and then they put Saquon Barkley back there, and I feel like New York has to be like every single week thinking, what if we would have had Saquon Barkley and Neighbors? What if that? But they don't.
Yeah. Well, I want to bring something else up, Matthew. Changing the topic a little bit.
Sure.
We said the Washington Commanders, I guess 3 times during this podcast, have prompted us to get a viewer. That viewer's name is Josh.
What?
And Josh has a question. He said, "Dude who replaced Josh?" ? Longtime listeners know that this is our Homer Josh, our Washington Commander fan.
Look at those glasses.
he hopped on with our millions of viewers that we have right now, and just wants to know who this Josh was. Josh, you'll have to go back to the beginning of the show. We introduced him. You can watch it. You can actually clip it and put it out on our TikTok. Tell people you evolved if you want to claim it as yourself. Tell people you switched to a Vikings fan if you want to do that. Although Jaden Daniels is playing well right now, I don't know why you would. But Josh, this is Josh.
Nice to meet you, Josh.
There it is. Well, you can always count on Matthew, Brandon, and Josh here on Football Fandemic every week. I think that's good for this week. Let's watch the games. Let's see how they go. Next week, we'll come back and maybe talk about that Packers-Vikings game and the fallout of it, along with all the stuff in Week 5. I think that's going to do it for us this week here on the Football Fandemic. Josh, thank you for being with us, and all of you out there watching and listening, thank you for joining us here on the Football Fandemic.